Hi everyone, welcome to today's session. Okay, before I start, I always ask this question. Can I be seen and can I be heard? And if I can be seen and heard, then please a thumbs up. So in the meantime, hi Ashad, hi Miss Tainley, hi Official Gamer, hi Jenny, hi Aditi. Can I be seen? Can I be heard? Quickly thumbs up so that we can proceed. Hi Sadan, hi Raju, hi Shahina, hi Hema Prabha, hi Kamal, hi Papiya, nice to see you again. Hi Shankar. Okay, so I'm just saying hi to everyone because, but I have no input as to whether I can be seen or heard. So please thumbs up if I can be seen or heard. All right, so Manish has given me a whole lot of thumbs ups, which means that I can be seen and I can be heard. So to all of you, my students, a very, very, very warm welcome once again to BYJU'S 8 to 10 Social Science Sample Paper Discussion. So the wait is over, huh? CBSE has released their sample question paper. So now there's no suspense. All of this time there was suspense. What sort of paper are we going to have? Term 1 was objective. Is term 2 going to be subjective or objective? Tension, tension, suspense, suspense, suspense. Well, like I told you, even before we got the sample paper, we prepare ourselves for any eventuality, and now that we actually do have the sample paper, well then that's a bonus because we have more clarity. So as we know, term 2 is going to be a subjective question paper, and CBSE has just recently released the format of the paper, given us the marking scheme of the paper, all the different sections, and they've given us sample questions as well as sample answers. So in today's discussion, we are going to go through this sample paper. We're going to understand the format briefly because we've already released a video out there to tell you more about the sample paper format. But today we will be discussing the format, we will be going through the questions, we will briefly be going through the answers, we will revisit the concepts where necessary, and what we're also going to do is we're going to give you some similar questions to say that if this sort of question doesn't come, then what are the other possible questions that you could get. So are we ready? Papiya says she's excited for this session. Umar says never ever heard Hindi from you, ma'am. Please Hindi. Yes, Hindi में बात कर सकते हैं. Not a problem at all. But like I said, let's just continue. Let's understand the format of the paper. So, general instructions, this question paper is divided into 5 sections, namely A, B, C, D and E. CBSE says that all questions are compulsory. We know that in term 1 we were given a choice. We could leave out a few questions. Now this is not a choice this time. All questions are compulsory. Ma'am, your Hindi sounds funny. That's why I try not to talk, but I will improve it also. Section A says question number 1 to 5 are very short answer type questions of 2 marks. Okay. Section B says question, and here the answer to each question should not exceed 40 words. Then question number 6 to 8 are short answer type questions carrying 3 marks each, and the answer to each question should not exceed 80 words. Section C, which is questions 9 to 10, are long answer type questions carrying 5 marks each, and the answer to each question should not exceed 120 words. I know all of you have the sample paper with you, so I'm quickly skimming through it, all right? Then section D has question numbers 11 and 12, which are case-based questions. You will be given a comprehension or a passage, and then you will be asked further questions on these case, on this case or on this comprehension. We will understand how to answer these questions when we come to that particular question. Section E is question number 13, which is map-based, and this carries 3 marks, right? So we have 2 parts. One is from history, 1 mark is from history, and we have geography, 2 marks. All right. Now, again, they've said that there is no overall choice in the question paper, which means all questions are compulsory. However, in some questions, there is an internal choice that has been provided. They may tell you answer A or B. And in such questions, it's very clearly mentioned. And in that case, only one of those choices have to be answered. In addition to this, there is separate instructions which are given for each section and question wherever it is necessary. Total number of marks for this paper will be 40 and the time allowed will be 2 hours. All right, let's move on. Let's get into the first question and let's see what CBSE has given us. The first question given by CBSE is a history question based on the chapter Nationalism in India. And this is a fact-based question. The question says, how did the non-cooperation movement unfold in the cities and towns of India? Well, for those of you who attended our session in history, you will know that we have actually covered this question for you. Let's take a quick look at the sample answer given by the CBSE. As we can see over here, the sample answer given by the CBSE, they've given us a whole lot of points. But since this is a 2-mark question, they have told us that we can choose any 2 points. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you. You have the sample paper with you, so you can refer to it whenever you like. I'm just going to go about answering how we should, what are the questions that have come, what are the possible answers when we haven't discussed it before, and to tell you that we have discussed those answers in certain sessions before. So for example, in the case of this, we have already discussed this in our history session before. We spoke about the non-cooperation movement, the different strands within the movement, and we specifically also spoke about the movement in towns. For all of you who attended the history session, do you remember the formula or the mnemonic with which we discussed the different social strands in the different strands within the movement in terms of the non-cooperation movement? Yes! Disha, Manasa, you all have given me the correct answer. We did discuss this with P square E. What is P square E? P square E stands for participant, which is 1 P, progress, which is the other P, and end, which is the E. So we have already discussed this. I'm not going to go through the same thing again with you, but we basically, from here you will get your answers to answer question number 1. Okay, and if you want more details, then you can go back and visit our history session, take a look at that video, and you will get more answers or more content as to how you can answer. 2 points is very easy to get from this, right? Okay, now in terms of questions, the question that has been asked by the CBSE is actually about the movement in the towns, okay, as in how did the non-cooperation movement unfold in cities and towns of India. But you could get not necessarily about the towns, you could get a similar question which asks you, how did the non-cooperation movement unfold in the plantations? Now, once again, we have covered this with the formula P2E. We covered this, we covered Swaraj in the plantations, where we spoke about it being led by plantation workers in Assam. This was because of the Inland Emigration Act of 1859, where they couldn't leave the tea gardens, etc. So we've given you the whole thing again in terms of participation, that is participants, progress, and end. So you will get your answers for here. I'm not going to actually go and solve the question for you. You can refer to our history session for this. Now, talking about similar questions, one is the non-cooperation movement. So you could get questions based on the different strands of the non-cooperation movement. This is one type of question, whether it's movement, whether it's in the countryside, or whether it's in the plantations. Another type of question that you could get is about the civil disobedience movement. See, nationalism in India basically talks about 2 mass movements, which is the non-cooperation movement and the civil disobedience movement, and both these movements are very important. So you could get a question based on the civil disobedience movement asking you which was the different social classes and groups participating in the civil disobedience movement. For example, this question says the civil disobedience movement saw the participation of different social classes and groups. Give reasons for the participation of the following, and they've said A, women, B, rich peasants, C, industrialists, D, working class, and E, poor peasants. So you could get questions on any one of these. They may tell you, tell us about the participation of the women, or tell us about the participation of the industrial classes, or they may ask you about participation of all these social groups, in which case it will be a long question. Again, we have discussed this in our history section very in a lot of detail. We spoke about the rich peasants in terms of the Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh. Now, non-cooperation movement we spoke about in terms of P square E. When we spoke about the participation in the civil disobedience movement, we used another formula. Who can tell me what we used over there? We used the formula or the mnemonic BR. What is BR? B stands for background and R stands for reason, and this is how we discussed each of these social groups that were taking part in the civil disobedience movement. What was their background and what was their reason for participating in the civil disobedience movement. So I'm not going to go through it again. Yes, Sangeeta, BR, absolutely right. All of you who've said BR. Rich peasant community, what was their background? What was the reason that they participated? Then we went ahead to discuss the poor peasantry group. What was the background that they had? What was the reason for them participating in the civil disobedience movement? Then we spoke about Indian merchants and industrialists. Again, what was their background? What was their reason? And we did the same thing for industrial working class, and we did the same thing for women. So you will get more than ample content, more than ample amount of points in the history session that we have already covered with you. So I'm just going to skim through this one. All right, let's move on to our second question in the CBSE sample paper. This question says, why is tourism considered as trade? This is from geography, as we can see. This is from the chapter Lifelines of National Economy, and this is, the nature of the question is an analytical question, which means that this is not a question that you will get directly in your textbook. This you'll have to think about a little bit, and you'll have to infer the answer from what you understand about the situation. Okay, Sangeeta, for BR, if you want explanation of BR, it's a good thing for you to go and attend our history session that we've done already. So go attend that and you will get a full explanation of BR in terms of all the different social groups. Time is short, so I will not be repeating it again over here. Okay, why is tourism considered as a trade? CBSE has already given their answers. They've given us a whole lot of points, and they've said choose any 2 points because it is a 2-mark question. Yes, Manasa, we also spoke about 3S, but that's not linked to this particular question, so I'm not going to be discussing it right now. Okay, so any 2 points from this, but conceptually, if you think about this question, why is tourism considered as a trade? To answer this question, we first need to understand what is trade in the first place. What is the definition of trade? Well, trade is basically buying or selling of goods and services for money. Now, when we're talking about buying or selling, we are talking about exchange of goods and services. When we're talking about money, we are talking about generation of income. So, in terms of tourism, is there exchange in tourism? Does exchange happen, as in is there buying and selling of services and goods? And is there generation of money in tourism? If these 2 things are there, then tourism can be considered as a trade. So let us understand this. In tourism, definitely there is exchange, because there is exchange of services such as medical treatment when we are talking about medical tourism. There's exchange of services in terms of recreation or relaxation, tourist guides, etc. when we are talking about wildlife or adventure tourism. Also, there is exchange of goods when foreigners come to our country and they buy the local handicrafts, right? So there definitely is exchange of goods and services. Is there generation of money? Of course, there's generation of money. There is generation of foreign exchange because of tourism. So this is money coming into the country, as well as generation of income by the people who are working in the tourism industry. So if you take a look at this, there's definitely exchange happening, and there's definitely generation of income happening, and which is why tourism can be considered as trade. I've explained this as a concept to you. Any of these points can be taken and put into the 2-mark question. All right. Okay, let's just move ahead. we will discuss a similar question that could come, okay? So here we've given you a question that could come, not necessarily about tourism, but you could get a question that says, why are the means of transportation and communication called the lifelines of a nation? So you could get a question like this. Now, again, the amount of information that you should put into a question depends on whether it's a 2-mark question, 3-mark question or a 5-mark question. If it is a 2-mark question, put in 2 points. If it's a 3-mark question, put in 3 points. And if it is a 5-mark question, put in 5 points. Okay, minimum. So, for example, in terms of transportation and communication, if it is just a 2-mark question, then all we need to do is transportation and communication can be considered as the lifeline of the nation, because number 1, it helps in economic development, number 2, it helps in social development, and number 3, it helps in terms of national integration. That is it. You don't need to write anything more. But if it is a 3-mark question or a 5-mark question, then you need more detail, right? So for which also I have given you the detail over here in a tabular form so that you will understand it. In terms of the first reason, economic development, if you need more points, how do transportation and communication help economic development? Well, there in terms of transportation, we have a delivery of inputs for the agriculture or the industries, right? So how are the raw materials or the things that are needed transported through the transportation system? So definitely helps the economic development of the country. Trade and commerce of the produced goods, yes, this also leads to economic development, because when there's buying and selling of goods, there's money involved, so this leads to economic development. This facilitates the development of robust service industries like the IT sector development. So automatically this is more economic development for the country, right? And then this facilitates infrastructure development. So for example, in terms of transport, you have the building of roads or the laying down of railway networks, etc. So all this is infrastructure, right? And then it helps in market integration, because of transportation and communication, you have more access to markets. Everything becomes more closely connected. Markets are also interconnected, and more buying and selling can happen. So this is also a great thing, and it helps in terms of power generation. So you may even get a question to ask, how does transport and communication help in economic development? And these are the points that you have to say. Okay, now next, how does the transport and communication help in terms of social development? Well, number 1, it helps to reduce poverty. There are more jobs created. When there is more employment or jobs created, automatically poverty becomes less. There are more people, because of transportation and communication, have access to health and education. So definitely this is a social issue that is handled, and there is it reduces regional disparity, because overall when there is development because of facilities like this, regional disparity is definitely reduced, right? And third point, it helps in national integration. Yes, Yashat, we will teach this chapter in concept capsule as soon as possible. You will get a session for this soon, okay? But we will keep you posted about the dates, right? We're always here with you. We will cover all sessions. Thirdly, it helps in national integration. How will it help in national integration? Yes, Nikesh, nation will be more united through the exchange of ideas. Absolutely correct. There will be exchange of ideas because of communication. Transport also makes it easy for people to travel to far distances. So the whole country or the people of the country feel more connected. There is more belongingness, and thus it helps national integration also. Okay, let's move on to our third question in CBSE, okay, in the CBSE sample paper, which is differentiate between one party and two-party system. This is a question on political science, and it is about political parties, and this is a conceptual question. Yes, Disha, that last point was about cultural diversity also. Okay, so let's just see what CBSE has given us. CBSE has I put it for you here in tabular form, but basically the answer is the same. CBSE says one party system is where only one party is allowed to control the government. So it's called a one party system. They've given us an example. Two party system is where only two main parties contest elections. This is called a two party system, and they've given us an example. Now conceptually, we need to understand what are the different party systems that we have. So we have three kinds of party systems, okay. Number 1 is the one party system. Now what happens in the one party system? As CBSE has already given us and as we already know, only one party is allowed to contest the election or can come to power. A prime example of this is China, where you have only the Communist Party ruling the country. Second type of party system is a two-party system, which is basically that two parties can contest election and any one of these two parties could come to power. For example, in the case of USA or UK, now in USA, for example, you have two parties, which is basically the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, and any of these could come to power in election. Then you have the multi-party system. Multi-party system means that there are many political parties. It can be exceeding two, and any of these have the freedom and the choice to contest an election, and any of these can come to power. It's not restricted to a certain number in terms of the amount of parties that we have, right, that are allowed to contest election, and India is a prime example for this, right? Yes, Disha, one party system, bi-party system and multi-party system. This kind of answer you can easily say if they ask you what are the different party systems and it's a 2-mark question, then you just name the 3. If they ask you to explain what these party systems are, then you will need to give more points about each of these. Okay, now you could get a similar question. At every question that is coming from CBSE, I am giving you a similar question so you can understand what is the variety of questions that you could get and you can prepare yourselves accordingly. Okay, yes, United Kingdom also has a two-party system, absolutely right, Yasharth. Okay. Similar question that you could get in terms of political parties. Instead of talking about the party system, they may ask you, mention any 2 challenges faced by the political parties of India. Now, challenges of political parties is definitely part of our syllabus. Here I put down for you 4 challenges of political parties. For a 2-mark question, you have to select only any 2 points. So what are the 4 things that could be a challenge? You select what you want to write. Number 1 is lack of internal democracy. What does lack of internal democracy means? That in political parties, there is generally power that is concentrated in the hands of a few people, right? Either the leader or just immediate followers of the leader. The other members largely may not have that much power, and that is why they may not affect the decision making of the party too much, and that is why we say that it lacks internal democracy, because power is concentrated in the hands of a few. There is dynastic succession. What does this mean? That the leader of the party is generally chosen because of the family that he belongs to, and if a particular person is a leader, then someone from his family is more likely to become the next leader. So it doesn't other people don't really have that much of a chance to become the leader of the party, and this is why we are saying that this is a problem. It is dynastic succession. It's not really based on merit. Then there is the growing role of money and muscle power. What does this mean? This means that political parties are able to exert influence nowadays only if they have political clout, influence and money. Right? So the other people the parties who do not have this, unfortunately, do not seem to be able to influence people so much because of this kind of problem over here. They're not able to reach as many people. Then there's the 4th reason is the lack of provision of meaningful choice to voters. What does this mean? Lack of provision to meaningful choice to voters means that take a country like India. Now, India has many parties, okay? So it seems like we have a lot of choices to choose from. But if you actually consider the fundamentals or the ideals of each of these parties, the fundamentals of all these parties are pretty much the same, or the ideologies are pretty much the same. It could be that, the processes are different or the format is different, but it's pretty much the same fundamental, and which is why we say that the voters, while it seems like there are a lot of parties, we don't have that much choice. Okay, so this is a similar question that could be asked. You could select any of these. Okay, all right. Now, we have the 4th question as given by CBSE. State the role of the Reserve Bank of India. Again, this is a 2-mark question. The subject is economics, chapter is money and credit. And what is the nature of the question? The nature of the question is a conceptual question, which means that this is a concept-based question. Okay, let's take a look at the answer given by CBSE. Again, CBSE has given us a whole lot of points and said select any 2 points. But again, to understand the concept of this question, because it is a conceptual question, we need to understand more about the RBI. What is the RBI? RBI is the Reserve Bank of India. What is the role of the RBI? This is what we have to understand. RBI is the Central Bank of India, or the main bank of India. What does this bank do? Well, this is the regulatory body which is responsible for the issue and supply of the Indian rupee. So we get our currency because of RBI. And this is the regulator of the Indian banking system, which means that the RBI sets down rules for all the different banks, and all the banks of the country have to follow the rules or the guidelines set down by the RBI. And this is why the RBI is very important. So if they're asking you about the role of the RBI, it could be any of these things, right? Okay. Now let's discuss a similar question that could come. Okay, now talking about the RBI, one question is the role of the RBI. The second type of question, or another type of question that you could get, would be how does the RBI regulate the formal sector credit? Now, in this kind of question, if it is a short type of question, then all you need to say is that the banks have to submit document on information as to how much money they are lending, to whom they are lending, interest rate, etc. They are responsible or accountable to the RBI in this sense, and this is how the RBI regulates formal sector credit. But if it's a 3-mark question, then you need to put in more points. Then what will you do? You will write the role of the RBI as discussed, plus you will talk about this point as to how it regulates the formal sector credit, right? So this is a possible question. Another question that you could get is, why is it good to have a supervising authority for formal sector credit? We know that RBI is the supervising authority for formal sector credit, so this is also technically linked to the to the role of RBI, right? So we need to understand, why is a supervising authority important? Well, in terms of credit, we know that there are two sectors. There is the formal sector and there is the informal sector. Formal sector has a supervising authority, which is the RBI, but the informal sector, there is no supervising authority. Is this a good thing? This is not a good thing, because naturally when there is no supervising authority, what happens over here? There is a higher cost of borrowing, which means there are high interest rates, which becomes very difficult for people to repay, right? So they could go into debt traps. They may go into a negative cycle of debt. There are no proper transaction records, so this tends to be very unjust or unfair. At any point in time, unfair practices can happen. Use of unfair means to get the money back, which means if the borrowers cannot give the money back to the lenders, then even unfair and unlawful practices could be used. And in this sense, it is very important to have a regulatory body like the RBI that is supervising credit, right? So this is the question you might get, or the possible questions that you could get about the RBI. We've given you everything that we could think of over here, but basically it's about the, if you think about it, it's actually all about the role of the RBI and how the role of the RBI helps, right? But it could be framed differently like this. Next question, we move on to question number 5, which is again a 2-mark question. This says total production of finished steel in India. You've been given the table over here, given and you need to answer the questions that follow. There are 2 questions that are placed, so it'll be 1 mark each. Now in this table, what have we been given? On one side we've been given the year, all the various years, and the idea on the other side is to give the production, which is the production in million tons, right? So each year and the corresponding production of steel. Now, what are the questions that have come in terms of this? So, the first question is 5.1, which says, compare the 2015-16 and 2019-20 data and give any one reason for the reduction of production of steel in 2019-2020. And the second question over here based on this is, why is production and consumption of steel considered as an index of a country's development? We know this is from geography, we know this is from manufacturing industries, which we have already done a session on, and the nature of this question is an analytical question, which means that you You have to think about it, right? So let's talk about question 5.1, which says, compare the 2015-16 and 2019-20 data. Give any one reason for the reduction of production of steel in 2019-2020. CBSE has given us a few points over here. But what is this question actually asking us? If you think about it, what we covered in our session in geography, this question is actually asking us about the challenges of the iron and steel industry, right? We've spoken about the challenges of the iron and the steel industry. We discussed it in our session to say, okay, what is the reason as to why the iron and steel industry is not doing as well as they should be. Why? Because of the high cost and the limited availability of coking coal. There is lower productivity of labor. There is irregular supply of energy. We've already discussed all these things in our session, right? So you already have material, you already have content to answer this question. This question is not asking nothing but the challenges of the iron and steel industry. Now, you could get a similar question. This question was about the challenges of the iron and steel industry. They could ask you what are the challenges faced by other industries, other manufacturing industries, in which case you will need to know the challenges of the other manufacturing industries. So when we talk about, I've given you it here in a table over here. We've got challenges faced by the cotton textile industries, those faced by the jute industries, and those faced by the sugarcane industries. This is important for you to understand because your question could come on any one of these industries, okay, whether it is iron and steel, textile, jute or sugarcane. So know the points for this. Challenges faced by the cotton textile industries, we've already discussed in detail. Lack of self-sufficiency in cotton production, erratic power supply, obsolete machinery in the weaving sector, and which is why our weaving is not of great quality, low output of labor, and stiff competition from synthetic fiber industry, which means that the natural fibers are much more expensive than the synthetic fiber, and as a result people tend to go for the synthetic fiber, and people tend to buy natural fiber less. Challenges faced by the jute-based industry is competition from foreign countries such as Bangladesh and Brazil. They also have the jute industries which are very, very good, and so there's competition from there. Stiff competition with the synthetic fibers again. Sugarcane industry, what is the challenges over here? We know that there is a seasonal nature of the industry. We don't have it year round. There are old and efficient methods of production. There is a delay in transportation of the cane to the factories. The cane is likely to get spoiled, and we need to maximize the use of bagasse. All of these are important points in terms of what are the challenges faced by these particular industries. Aparna, I'm purposely going fast because we've covered a lot of this already. Today's session is just to tell you what are the type of questions that are going to come, right? Questions that have been given by the sample paper as well as the possible questions that could come. Some of these questions have already been discussed in detail in our history and geography sessions, and which is why I'm not giving you much detail. And the other questions in terms of economics or political science, well, we will be doing sessions for those also, where I will be answering or discussing the content much more in detail, and this is why we are moving a little bit fast. All right, let's move on. We have question number 5.2 in the CBSE sample paper, which says, why is the production and consumption of steel considered as an index of a country's development? And the CBSE has given us some sample answers. I'm not going to read it again, okay? But what is this question asking us actually? They're actually asking us about the significance of the iron and steel industry, right? Again, this is something that we have discussed in our session, right? So how does the iron and steel industry help us? The steel products are used as raw material. It provides machinery for developing other industries. It helps exports to other countries. So they are asking about the significance. Now, you may not necessarily again get this question exactly. You may get a question that says, what is the significance of manufacturing industries in general? Right? And again, if you take a look at the slide, you will remember that we have discussed this in detail in our geography session, where we explained the significance. We had a whole topic that was dedicated, actually full subsection part 1, which was dedicated to this. Okay, what are the ways that the manufacturing industries help us? Well, if you have a 2-mark question, then all you need to do is say significance of manufacturing industries is, number 1, it helps in aiding agriculture. Number 2, it helps in terms of economic development. development, and number 3, it helps us to resolve social issues. But if it is a 3-mark question or it's a 5-mark question, then you need to give a little bit more detail. And if you remember in our session, I've given you all those details. I gave it to you in terms of each section over here. When we spoke about agricultural industries, I explained to you as to how the agricultural industry is helped by modernizing agriculture, also giving more people jobs or income other than agricultural income. When we spoke about economic development, we spoke about trade and commerce increasing, we spoke about export potential increasing, we spoke about attracting foreign exchange. When we spoke about resolving social issues, we spoke about reducing poverty, we spoke about reducing unemployment, we spoke about making it reducing regional disparity, right? So we have discussed all of this. You will get these points more in detail if you go back and you take a look at our video on the geography session again. All right, let's move on. We are now on to our 6th question, which is our first 3-mark question. This question says, why do most of the rural households still remain dependent on the informal sources of credit? This is on economics. The chapter is money and credit, and the nature of the question is an analytical question. Okay, Vijaya Gomathi, hi, hello to you. You wanted me to take your name. I'm taking your name. Let's move on to see the answer that has been given to us by CBSE. CBSE, once again, for a 3-mark question, they've given us a couple of points over here, quite a few points, and we have to select 3 points that we want to talk about. 3 points for 3-mark question, 5 points for 5-mark question, 2 points for 2-mark questions at least. You can always put a little bit extra if you have time, but this is the minimum requirement. Okay. Now, a money and credit lecture will be coming very, very soon. You will, in fact, we have it coming up next week. You will get a notification for this, right? Not next week, in fact, this week. It's on Friday. You can attend that session. You will get more details on the channel. Okay. Let us understand in terms of this question, why do most of the rural households still remain dependent on the informal sources of credit? We know that the formal sector of credit is definitely a better sector to go to in case we want to take a loan, because as we discussed, we have the supervising authority, or we have the supervising authority, namely the RBI. So why are people still going to the informal sources of credit? One thing that you will find very helpful over here is this graph. You have this graph even in your textbook. This graph basically explains what is the percentage of people that are relying on the informal sector, which is shown to us in terms of the blue color, and what is the percentage of people who are taking loans from the formal sector, which is shown to us in terms of the purple color. Now, if you actually understand what the graph is saying over here, if you take a look at this, the poor households and the households with few assets, these people are still relying on the informal sector, as you can see in the graph. But if you take a look at the well-off households and the rich households, what are they relying on? They are relying on the formal sector. So, since the formal sector is a much better sector, why are the poor people or the rural households still relying on the informal sector? Well, there are many reasons for this. Yes, Nikesh, that is absolutely right. He says lack of necessary documents, absence of banks in rural areas. This is absolutely right, Sukhjot and Nikesh. This is the correct answer. What are the factors affecting the choice of credit? Number 1, collateral. The people in the rural households may not have a collateral. Collateral is the security that formal sector of credit requires so that they can ensure that the money comes back to them. A lot of these people do not have assets to put up as a collateral. Also, they do not have assets, and if you take in the rural areas or in the with the poorer sections of society, there the money lenders are who? They are basically the landowners or the employers, and they know the borrowers personally. So they actually agree to go ahead and give that loan without a collateral, which then makes it much easier for these people to take a loan from an informal source, right? It may not be good in the long run, but to get the loan, it's actually easier. Then, what is the second factor? It is documentation requirement. We know that the formal sector requires a lot of documentation. Of course, it depends source to source and depends country to country. But the point is that there is a lot of documentation required. And the people who are in the rural areas or in the poorer households, they may not have the education to understand this documentation. They may not be able to read. They may not be able to write. They may find this whole thing very cumbersome and tiresome to go through all this jhanjat, as we say in Hindi or in Hindi slang, to say go through the jhanjat or go through the trouble of going through all this documentation, and which is why for them it's easier to just take the loan from the informal sector. Again, not very good in the long run. Another reason as to why they take it from the informal sector is because of the availability. There are not that many banks in the rural sector, so naturally whatever is available to them, they'll take from there, and this is the third factor. So this is how you would go ahead and answer this question. Like I said, this is a 3-mark question and you have 3 points put over here. Next, you have question number 6B. Now, we know that in the 6th question, we had a choice. We could have answered 6A or we could have answered 6B. What is the question on 6? What does 6B say? It says, how do self-help groups help borrowers to overcome the problem of lack of collateral? Explain. This is a 3-mark question. Again, money and credit, same chapter, analytical question. Now for this, what do we need to do? Well, for this, first of all, we will go through what CBSE has given us. This is the sample answer by CBSE. Once again, they've said attempt, choose any 3 points. But to understand this, we first need to understand what a self-help group is, right? So what is a self-help group? A self-help group is basically a small group of members, probably 15 to 20 members in rural areas, particularly women, who organize themselves to pool in their savings or pool in their money to form a self-help group. Now, how does this help? Because when people pool in their income together, there is more money available. So, if someone needs money to expand their business or for a particular purpose, then they are able to take money as a loan from the self-help group. Right? So in this sense, it's a very helpful thing to have a self-help group. Now, why is it that the self-help group does not need a collateral from the bank or from the formal sector? Well, because if you see, the group is a whole unit. It's an entity. Now, generally a collateral is needed by individual people because in case they are not able to pay the money back, the formal sector of credit requires a security for themselves. So if the person cannot pay the money back, the collateral is used to be sold and the money is got back. Now, in terms of the group, there are many people over there, right? So we need to understand as to how this is helping. If one person in the group is a defaulter, the other people will help, the other people will pressurize, and so the money, the loan is given as a unit in the name of the self-help group, and that is why the bank doesn't need a collateral from self-help groups. Let's move on and let's take a look at a similar question that we could get. This question says, how do self-help groups help in women empowerment? Well, again, self-help groups, we've already explained the function of self-help groups over here. But in terms of empowerment, we say it is that the group is taking all the decisions about loan, what is the amount of the loan, what is the purpose of the loan, what is the mode of repayment, what is the interest rate. So this decision-making ability gives them more of a sense of empowerment. Right? Then financial inclusion. What does this mean? We know that the group generally consists of women. These women, when they're able to take loans, they're able to expand their business. When they're able to expand their business, they're able to generate more income, which is normally something that is restricted only to men, right? Especially in a country like ours. So in this sense, they have financial inclusion. And the self-help group serves as a platform for women to discuss various issues such as health, nutrition, domestic violence, etc. So in that sense, it acts as a support group. Can I please just have the comments coming up? I'm not able to see the comments over here. There seems to be some sort of technical thing over here. Yeah, I'd like to, yes, now I can see the comments. Thank you very much. Let's just move on to our next question, which is question number 7. Tribal peasants interpreted the message of Mahatma Gandhi and the idea of Swaraj in another way and participated in the non-cooperation movement differently. Justify the statement. History, nationalism in India. Again, all the history questions are from nationalism in India. It's a very, very, very important chapter. So please go back and take a look at the session that we did for you. It will really, really help you, right? Nature of the question is to evaluate, which means that we need to give examples or facts to support or justify the statement. What is this question about? The question again is about the non-cooperation movement. This is the sample answer given by the CBSE, and we have to, I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but if you take a look at it, we have again covered this earlier in today's session. We've covered it in our history session. This is basically rebellion in the countryside, right? We're talking about non-cooperation movement in the countryside. They've spoken about the tribal peasants. We discussed this again in terms of P square E. Who were the participants? They were the tribals of Gudem Hills. They were led by Alluri Sitaram Raju. What was the progress and why did this end? Right? You could get another question on this again, talking about not necessarily the tribals, but you get something talking about the peasants of Awadh. Again, in this case, you know who were the participants. They were the peasants of Awadh. Who were they led by? Baba Ramchandra. What was the progress? This is what they wanted. And in terms of the end, why did it end? So again, I'm not going to go through it. You have the details with you, but these are the types of questions that you could get on the non-cooperation movement in terms of participation, right? Then, similar question. From this chapter, you could also get a question on nationalism, collective identity basically, which we have discussed. There were a variety of cultural processes through which nationalism captured people's imagination. Justify the statement, which means you have to give examples. So we know that national identity or sense of belongingness was encouraged through cultural processes like images of Bharat Mata. We spoke about this last time. It was also done in terms of folklores or stories that spread all around the nation about the Indian culture, and we had Rabindranath Tagore and Natesa Sastry who collected a lot of these folk tales. Then you have icons and symbols such as the tricolor flag that were, sort of encouraged to be used or recognized as symbols of national identity or belongingness. And we have the reinterpretation of history, where we were taught to take pride in India's history in terms of the struggle of the British and our achievements. So these are the 4 cultural processes through which nationalism captured the people's imagination. All right, let's move on to our next question, question number 8. Examine the role of political parties in a democratic country. Again, this is from political science, political parties, analytical question. We will see what the CBSE has given us. They've given us a whole lot of questions and a whole lot of points over here. We have to choose any 3. All right. Now, let me explain this concept to you. I'm going to quickly explain it because this session has still not happened. It will happen. We will give you more detail, but very quickly. If you wanted to form a political party with your friends, okay, what is the role or what is the functions that you and your party would perform? Well, it's interesting. If you and your friends came together and formed a party, well, then your party has the chance to form and run the government. Thank you, Janvi. She says, ma'am, you're my favorite teacher. Thank you. We know in a democratic country like ours, there are various people who have various opinions. So people with similar opinions, they get together, maybe like you and your friends who have the same fundamentals, you all get together and start a party, and then you all have the chance to take part in elections and actually run the government. Now, what else could you and your friends do? You and your friends would also have a very decisive role in terms of making policies for the country, right? So what do political parties do? They make policies, they make programs, and then voters choose which political party to support based on the policies and the programs that are liked by them. Right? Then what else could you do if you had a political party? Well, you could contest in elections, which means you can put your own candidates up to take part in the election, and if you win, you will form the ruling party. But even if you don't win, no problem at all, because parties that lose the election, they form the opposition, and the opposition is also very, very important, right? So the opposition, they voice different views, they form a check to the government in terms of their failures, and if there are policies that they don't like, they put up resistance to it. So then also you have a very important role. Also, if you were the political party, you and your friends were the political party, then you could shape public opinion, which means if you want to influence the public on a particular matter, then you could organize pressure groups, and you could have mass movements that actually help people to understand the issue, and you could talk about solving problems, and this way you can shape public opinions, right? Also, if you were a political party, then you have the very important job of forming a link or a bridge between the citizen and the government. We know that a citizen cannot directly approach the government, so it's easier for the citizen to approach the local leader, that is you and maybe your friends, and then this way they will have access to the government machinery and welfare schemes, right? So these are the ways that political parties, this is the role of political parties in a democracy. And depending upon the number of points, depending on the number of marks, if it's a 3-mark question, you put in 3 points minimum. If there's a 5-mark question, then you put in lots more points, right? So this is the concept. Okay. Similar question that you could get in terms of political parties. You could get a question to say, what reforms have been made to strengthen political parties? Again, we see this is a 3-mark question. I've given you 3 points over here. In terms of reform, we have constitution amendment. Okay. Thank you, Papia. That's a lovely comment. Thank you, Girjesh. Very sweet comments over here. Constitution amendment means that if any MLA or MP changes parties, then he or she, what will happen to them? They will lose their seat in the legislature. And this is an amendment against the practice of defection. It is a provision against defection, right? Because sometimes what happens is people, they come to power and then they change their party. So this is against that. Then we have a Supreme Court order which makes it compulsory or mandatory for every candidate who is contesting the elections to file an affidavit giving details of his property and criminal cases pending against him. So this is more information for the voters, right? Because they know exactly who to vote for based on this information. Then the Election Commission's order has made it necessary for political parties to hold their organizational elections and file their income tax returns. So this is more financial transparency so that the money cannot just be spent anyhow, right? There is accountability, there is transparency, and these are the reforms that have come about to strengthen political parties, right? Okay, let's move on to our 9th question. This says democracy's ability to generate its own support is itself an outcome that cannot be ignored. Support the statement with examples. This is from political science. Now this is from a different chapter. This is from outcomes of democracy, and this is an analytical question. Okay, so let's just take a look at what the CBSE has given us. CBSE has given us a whole lot of points. Actually, this particular question is a very important question because this is the crux or the main topic of this chapter. For this, you need to understand what a democracy is and what the features are, right? So this is what has been given by the CBSE, but for you to understand in concept, okay, this question can be answered by understanding why there is a support for democracy. Why do people want democracies? People want democracies because in a democracy, they have the right to choose their own leader in the elections. So this is very important for the citizens. In a democratic government, this is a people's government and it is run by the people, for example, a representative democracy. In a democracy, citizens are given the right to information about the government and its functioning. So I know that, so in a democracy, there is accountability, right? The people know the government is accountable to the people because it is a people system. It is a government by the people themselves. So that is why it is support for itself. In democracies, decision making will be based on norms and procedure. It requires certain practices, rules, etc. It cannot just be done based on the decision or the whim of some person, right? So there are proper practices and norms and procedures for this. In a democracy, every citizen has the right and means to examine the process of decision making, which means again there is transparency. And in terms of, yes, Nikesh, it will make power not to concentrate in the hands of one ruler. Absolutely right. This is correct. Produces a government that is accountable, legitimate, and transparent. So you understand why there would be support for a democracy, because of all these benefits. These features are the reason that people want a democracy, right? Now, we had part 9b. You were given a choice in 9. You could answer either 9 or you could answer 9b. 9b was what? There is an overwhelming support for the idea of democracy in South Asia. Support with examples. Again, this is from Outcomes of Democracy. If you understand the concept of democracy, you will be able to solve any of these questions. Okay, if you take a look at what CBSE has done, again they put it in point format as usual. You have to, this is a 5-mark question, you will be giving minimum 5 points. Right? However, to basically understand or how to answer this question, we've already discussed the features of the democracy. The only different thing really that you have to say over here is that there is evidence from South Asian countries showing that they want democratic rights for people. Right? This is why people in the South Asian countries want democracies, because they want democratic rights. What are the countries that want this? India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And why do they want democratic rights for the people? Because democratic government is the people's government. They want to elect their own representatives. Democracy gives dignity and freedom to its people or its citizen, and democracy accommodates social diversity, and this is why they want democratic rights for their people. Correct? Okay. Now, similar question. Again, this is on democracy, but like I said, if you know the concept of democracy, any question is very easy for you to answer. So we've put a question over here that says, democracies lead to peaceful and harmonious life among citizens. Support the statement with suitable examples. So in a democracy, there's a rule by the majority, which means that as long as every citizen has an equal chance of being a part of the majority at some point in time. Right? They can contest in elections. Now, in a country like India, okay, when you're talking about conflicts, in a country as vast and diverse as India, there is bound to be conflicts among the people. You can't really eliminate conflicts. But what a democracy does is that it allows representation of various social groups, and this way you can negotiate the conflict or you can negotiate the problem. So in this sense, it is very, very helpful. Also, democracy accommodates various social divisions. It takes into account the views and opinions of many, right? So this is how democracies lead to peaceful and harmonious life. Like I said, understand the concept of democracy and you are set. Let's move on to question number 10. Question number 10 says, examine the role of information technology in stimulating the process of globalization. This topic is from Globalization and the Indian Economy. It is from economics and it is an analytical question. In terms of the answer that CBSE has given, actually CBSE has given us a brilliant answer as to what is the role of information technology in stimulating the process of globalization. Technology has been changing rapidly. We know this. Telecommunication facilities like the telegraph, mobile phones, internet, all these are used to contact and access information, which is very, very important. So it's helping the world to become a smaller place. Helps to communicate from remote areas. So again, it's connecting people. No matter what country. Development of satellite communication devices, these give us more information and makes the world a smaller place. Computers have now entered almost every field of activity. Absolutely right. So we have more information and we have more connect. One can obtain and share information through the internet. Absolutely right. Electronic email, that is email and voicemail across the world, is available at very low cost. So there is connectivity, the world comes together, and this is what globalization basically means in concept. It has played a major role in spreading out production of services across countries. So many points given by the CBSE, and this is all very, very important. Please remember this. You will have ample points to discuss and put if you follow these points over here. Now, talking about globalization, there are two factors basically that enable globalization. One is technology, which we've just discussed. We discussed it in terms of information technology. Yes, a united world, absolutely right. The second factor that enables globalization is liberalization of foreign trade and foreign investment policy. Now, you may get a question on liberalization of foreign trade and foreign investment policy also, that how does this enable globalization? So, this question over here, which is a similar question that you could get, says, examine the role of liberalization and foreign investment policy in stimulating the process of globalization. You could get a 3-mark question, you could get a 5-mark question, but how has it helped globalization? Number one, it has helped to reduce trade barriers. When the trade barriers are removed, automatically the restrictions on imports are removed, and so there is more money coming into the system. Businesses are allowed to make free decisions in terms of import and export. So again, this is great, right, for globalization. Foreign companies have got permission to set up their companies in India. Again, this is a very important point where we're sort of interconnecting with each other to make it a united world, as Disha says. Yes, so more access to foreign companies. This has opened up markets, increased competition, and when there is increased competition, the quality of products is also better. So this is great in terms of globalization. And there is integration of global economies. So you have all the economies of the world, united world, and basically a small global village, which the whole world can be considered now, right? And these are the factors that enable it, right? Making of a global world is absolutely correct. Now, question 10B, this was a choice question, okay? This says, assess the impact of globalization on India and its people. Again, CBSE has given some answers over here. I'm telling you over here that okay, this is the sample answers by the CBSE again over here. This slide has been repeated, okay? Why is, I want to tell you in terms of impact of globalization of India. When we're talking about impact, there are two sorts of impacts of globalization, right? This is positive impacts and negative impacts. We saw earlier to this, we actually saw, it was not a repeated slide, it was actually many points, right? If you see over here, question 10B, you had points over here, 1 to 5 points over here, and then you had 7 to so many points over here. Right? So all these points can be used to talk about impact, but in terms of impact, there are two main impacts. These impacts could be positive or negative. You could get a question to ask you just about the positive impacts. You could get a question to be asked only about the negative impact. You could get a question to ask about the impacts in general, and which is why you would have such a long answer as we saw in the CBSE sample paper. Right? Let's talk about the positive impacts in case we get a question just on the positive impacts. So in terms of positive impact of globalization on India, this has facilitated greater competition. As a result of this, there is increased quality of products and services, and there is more choice to consumers. So this is a positive impact of globalization. Because of globalization, MNCs have increased their investments over here. So there are more industries which have goods by MNCs, such as automobiles, cell phones, soft drinks, etc. So we as consumers have more choices. There are more jobs for people, and there is an increased standard of living. Right? We will, yes, Disha, we will be taking this lesson more in detail. We will keep you posted about the date as to when this will happen. Actually, we will tell you, so stay tuned to the BYJU'S channel. And in terms of again, another positive impact, it has an impact on Indian companies. How does this help Indian companies? Well, there are local Indian companies that are actually providing raw material to these MNCs, and so their business does better, they are prospering. Top Indian companies are getting into newer and newer technology, and some of them have become MNCs themselves. So this is positively impacting globalization also. Also, there are many successful collaborations between the Indian companies and the foreign companies, so all of this is positive. However, there is a dark side to globalization also. What is the negative impact of globalization? Well, the small producers over here are quite badly affected, and there are flexible labor laws. Let me quickly explain. The small producers are affected because when MNCs are flooding the market with their product, these products are of great quality and they are much cheaper. So as a result, nobody is really buying from the smaller producers, and so their business is really affected. They are suffering. So this is the negative side. Then flexible labor laws. We know that MNCs want more profits, and government in India wants to attract more MNCs. So what have they done as a result of this? They've made flexible labor laws, which is not a very good thing if you think about it, because now people can be hired only for a short period of time. So there's no job security for the laborers or the workers, and it ignores many labor laws that are actually meant for the protection of workers. So this is a negative impact, right? So now we classified the impacts in terms of positive, negative, and you can give each separately depending on the question, or you can give it together if you get a question like the one that we've been given in our sample paper. Okay? Now, question number 11. Read the text and answer the following questions. It's a very long text. This is from history again. This is nationalism in India. Very, very important chapter. This tells us this is an important chapter, okay? And the nature of the question is comprehension, which means that there is a passage that has been given to us. I'm not going to read the whole passage. From the passage, there are certain questions that can be asked, which could be either direct questions or indirect questions, like I've told you before. If you take a look at this passage is basically talking about satyagraha, the concept of satyagraha. Now, there are questions that have been asked on this. 11.1 says, why did Gandhiji consider non-violence as a supreme dharna? This is talking about satyagraha. This is the sample answer over here. Then they have a question, how was Gandhi and satyagraha taken by the people who believed in his philosophy? Again, this is based on satyagraha. And then they have a third question, why was Gandhi and satyagraha considered as a novel way to resist injustice? And you've got a whole lot of points over here. This is a 2-mark question. You have to select any 2 points. Okay, this is also about satyagraha. But again, talking about satyagraha, the reason that I've not gone through those answers is because we've discussed the idea of satyagraha in our session in detail. We spoke about the fact that Gandhiji came to India in 1815 from South Africa, and he basically emphasized the idea of satyagraha with he said that this was the power of truth, and people need to search for truth, right? And people, this is including the oppressors, have to be persuaded to see the truth instead of being forced to accept truth through the use of violence. And it is suggested that if the cause is true, then physical force is not necessary at all. And if you take all these points, you will actually be able to answer all the 3 questions that have been given to you. Right? Okay, let's move on to our next passage based question, which is the geography question. Again, this is a paragraph that has been given to us. This is a case study that has been given to us, and this is talking to us about, oh sorry, this is not, I have jumped to the geography session. This I've given you over here is the similar question that could come for history. The format is that I'm giving you the ones that have been that are already been given by the CBSE, and the ones that are coming as similar questions, could come as similar questions. This similar question over here is on what concept? It's on the concept of non-cooperation, and this is talking about non-cooperation. If you take a look at the passage, it's actually talking about merchants and traders refuse to trade in foreign goods, foreign trade. This is again in the movement in the towns. We have discussed this in detail. You could get similar questions to ask. Explain the role of the Justice Party in terms of boycotting council elections. What was the effects of non-cooperation on the economic front, or how was the effects on the non-cooperation on the economic front, dramatic. Explain the effect of boycott movement on foreign textile trade. Again, we have discussed all of this again, right? Same P square E formula. Refer to this. All the questions that you have in this question have actually been covered over here. We've even spoken about the Justice Party of Madras. In that session, I've even told you why the Justice of Party of Madras did not want to take part in the non-cooperation movement, right? So please attend that session. You will get more answers. And we move on to question number 12, which is now the geography question. I'm sorry. So this geography question is about what? It is about communication, as we can see, and I'm going to give you the questions really quickly. There are 3 questions that have come from this passage. Examine the role of the Indian postal network. This is a direct question. Direct question means that the answer of this question will be found in the passage itself, right? Then differentiate between mass communication and personal communication. This is an indirect question. Indirect question means that you have to infer the answer, you have to understand the situation and then give the answer. Then you have analyze the significance of communication for a nation. This is an indirect question, right? Yes, Papiya, it's a very big passage. In your exam, you'll actually have to read the whole thing, right? And what is P2E? Anuj, for this, please attend the YouTube session that we did on history, nationalism in India, and you will understand P2E very, very well. Okay. Now, in terms of the first question that we got, the first question, which is examine the role of Indian postal network. This is a direct question. We've highlighted the answer for you over here. The answer is itself in this passage. It requires no discussion. Then, differentiate between mass communication and personal communication. This is an indirect question. Our passage does mention mass communication and personal communication, but it does not give the differences between the two. So, this is an indirect question. And here, so for example, we've given you the differences in 2 ways. We're talking about the intent or the intention and the medium used. So in terms of mass communication, what is the intention? The intention is to reach out to many people, like the mass section of people. What is the medium used? The medium used is radio, television, newspapers. Again, reaching out to many, many people at one point in time. Personal communication, what is the intention? To communicate between individual people. And what is the medium used? It is used in terms of covers, envelopes, letters, telephone calls, etc. Right? So this is the difference between the two. And we have one more question which says, analyze the significance of communication for a nation. This is an indirect question. This is basically talking about why communication is important. Well, this is the age of communication. We have lots of mediums of communication like telephone, television, films, etc. Books and magazines are also a means of communication. You have various means of communication that have connected and made the world closer. You have communication as a source of entertainment and knowledge, right? And you could have many points in this. So basically, this is how you would answer this particular question. And we move on to the last section, which is the map-based question. Thank you, Sai Arjun. He says, ma'am, you're the best teacher. Thank you very much. On the given outline of the political map of India, identify the place marked as A with the help of the following information and write its correct name on the line marked near it. The place where the non-cooperation movement was called off due to non-violence. Well, due to violence, not non-violence. It was called off because it was violent. What is this place? We have an arrow that is pointing to Uttar Pradesh. We have discussed this. We know the answer. This is Chauri Chaura in Uttar Pradesh, right? Also, similarly, for history, you could get many types of map questions like place where the Jallianwala Bagh massacre happened and it points to Punjab, for example, and you know that the answer is definitely Amritsar. Or you could get questions based on where was the Indian National Session held in September 1920, or this is the place where the Indian Congress session held was held in December 1920. So now you know September 1920 was Calcutta, December 1920 was Nagpur, and you have the arrows pointing to West Bengal and pointing to Maharashtra, so it's very easy for us to identify this. Now let's move on to the geography map questions. Here it says, on the given map of India, same given map of India, locate the following: Namrup thermal plant or Noida software technology. Means you have to select any one of these, okay? And you have to identify where the Rajasasi International Airport is. Now, there is a slight difference between history and geography map questions. In history map questions, we saw that the arrow was already pointed on the location. Like we already got an arrow pointing to Uttar Pradesh, and then we were given a question and we had to name that place. So we named Chauri Chaura. In terms of geography, what has been given is they've given us the statement, they've given us the place already. We have to locate the place on the map. So, for example, we have to locate where the Rajasasi International Airport is. It is in Amritsar. So we have to put a point on the place, on the state, to show exactly where it is. Or Noida Software Technology Park is in Noida, right? Or the Namrup Thermal Power Plant, we have to locate that it is in Assam. Right? So this is the difference between the history and geography maps. Now, in terms of geography maps, you will be given a political map of India. So for this, you have to know the political map of India quite well. You have to mark the points on the correct state, like I told you. So this is little different from history. And you have to use different techniques to remember maps, like stories, mnemonics, etc. If you remember our term 1 discussion, we did some stories and mnemonics that helped us to remember maps better, right? So these are things that you can actually use to remember it better. And actually with this, we have finished our entire CBSE sample paper discussion. We've covered all points. We've spoken about the format. We've spoken about the questions. We've spoken about the answers, and we've spoken about similar types of questions that could come. We've understood what are the important chapters over here. Now, just for you to know, we got passage-based questions here from, we got it from geography and we got it from history. That does not mean that we will not get passage-based questions from other subjects. For example, in the sample paper that was released by the CBSE in term 1, there was no passage-based question on economic, but actually in the paper there was. So you can get a question from any section, any chapter. Always best to be prepared in all your concepts thoroughly, and for this I would highly recommend that you go through our previous sessions, the sessions that are already done, for more details, and please definitely attend the sessions that we are going to do now in the coming weeks, because this will really help you. So I'm going to see you in the next session, and thank you for attending, and all the best for your exams. We are always with you. Bye-bye.